Chapter 4, Video 20. We're going to carry on with an example of our coded now and apply some of these concepts that we've been talking about in the PowerPoint. So in the in-class exercise, we're working our way down to this date checker validation tool. So this is the actual executable file, and how it works is if I was to type in, let's say the month is January and it's 2018, and click on check the date, what it does is it looks at what was entered in here, and if it was a 1, it puts January. If it's a 2, it puts in February. If it's a 3 and so on, it puts in March. Now, if there is something incorrect, let's say I put in January like that, and I click date checker, it says, date entry error, invalid entry. Now it doesn't tell me what the error was here. It really should say, it should give me some more information to the user. So when I click OK, this is a really nice feature, is it clears out the exact error because year was correct, and it returns me back. So when I type in a 1, or let's say I type in a 2, and I say let's check the date, it will calculate or figure out what date that is. Now comparatively, if I was to say let's go into the year 3000 and say let's check the date, the computer comes back with a little invalid month or year entry. Enter a valid month. Okay, well that is a valid month, or a year. So that year is not correct. So hopefully the user would figure this out, but probably this should say, an invalid year has occurred. Type something that's between a certain range. This is giving instructions that if I typed in JAN, for example, it should be entered in as a 1. That's clear for month, but there's no instructions for the date. So there's a bit of a disconnect on this program, but you guys could fix that up. All right, so that's how this one works. If I omit altogether, well, it just says I missed it. So if I type in, let's say 2000, it says invalid entry, and it tells me, I need to put the correct month in. And it works like that. So that's the understanding of the function and the logic behind the date checker validation. All right, so let's go back into the code and let's write it. So I'm going to double click on my date, enter that into the code, and for sake of time, I'm going to simply just type in the entire code in here. And you can pause it if you want. You could type in that code on your own computer. All right, so here's what I would suggest. Like before, we have to think about things like what are we going to declare? So I would probably start off with, we want to declare something, and then we want to assign, and then we want to calculate or put in some kind of condition in there, and then also outputting. And the outputting will occur later on. So let's go and explore how this code is written. Now the first part's just redundant of what we've been talking about in previous videos, declaring variables. So in this example, we obviously need a variable to hold for the month, we'll need one for the year, and then probably a variable for the output here, which I'm going to call a word month. Probably not the best. It should have been the date in words maybe. And it's going to be a string of characters because we're outputting that value. But the month is a string, that's clear because we only have 1 to 12, and year is of course an integer value because we have no decimals in years. So that's kind of pretty simple to set up our declarations of our variables. Now outputting the results, again, we're going to parse this information in the correct data type. Now we know when we enter in a month, it gets entered in as a string, so we've got to parse it into an integer so that can equal our variable. So that's how that works, and there's no syntax error there, and we'll do the same thing for a year. All right, now we're getting into the good stuff, the condition. Now in this example, what I'm doing is I'm putting in a test that if the month is less than 1, meaning 0, or the month is greater than 12, 13 or more, or the year is less than 1900 or greater than 2025, any of those conditions, I want the computer to pop up with an error message and say invalid. So the way that I've written this, I started off by testing the data and validating the data, because I don't want to even deal with invalid data and start looking at the data until I've tested to make sure it meets my minimum requirements. And this is really what we've been talking about in the previous videos, is how we can test the data. In this example, we used a series of expressions using a logical operators of OR. Any of these are true. If any of those are true, I want to display a message. All right.